Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this Hindu analysis, and we have 4 to 5 very interesting topics lined up for today. Now, if you go through the Hindu newspaper, the first topic deals with a conflict which is other than what is happening vis-a-vis Israel and Iran, and this deals with Afghanistan and Pakistan and tries to decode what has happened between these two partners previously, and now there's a proper open war which is happening between them. So we have to understand that. Good morning to all of you. Then we have two very interesting articles. One, what is happening in the Israel and Iran conflict, and the other one with regards to what is the fallout of that and what are the new developments which have happened. There's an editorial here. This is a text and context article. At the same point of time, India and Canada have inked a very interesting deal with regards to uranium, and comprehensive economic partnership will be in a way completed. That deal will be completed by the end of the year. We have the Supreme Court talking about blood transfusion, we'll see. And last but not the least is how this escalation in West Asia is going to impact our tea sector. So if you look at it, it's a very interesting mix of topics. We yesterday decoded the Israel and the Iranian relationship. Today also we have a very interesting editorial talking about why is that Israel is so obsessed with Iran. But our analysis will start with the Durand Line and what is happening between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Right. So the first discussion is with regards to a border which was created once the Radcliffe line was also created, which is this one. This is called the Durand Line. We have the Radcliffe line which divides India and Pakistan. At the same point of time, Durand Line divides Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, Pakistan-Afghanistan is a very interesting type of relationship because for a very, very long time, the US nurtured the Taliban within Pakistan in order to destabilize Afghanistan. And at the same point of time, once we had a US-led regime where India played a very important role within Afghanistan, Pakistan again nurtured the Taliban in order to destabilize the what we call as US-led democratic government in Afghanistan. Once Taliban took over in Afghanistan, it was seen that these two countries will come together and our access to West Asia is going to become problematic. Now, vis-a-vis how we thought this relationship will go, which is two partners wherein the Taliban and Pakistan will basically ally together, there will be cooperation, and our access to West Asia will become problematic, or Central Asia. We have seen multiple points of conflict and multiple points of military conflict between these two partners which are divided by the Durand Line. Now, before I go into the nitty-gritty, it's a very interesting article, very detailed in that regard. Let's try to understand what are the 3 to 4 sticking points which are leading to conflict around and in and along the Durand Line. Now, at the heart of this issue and at the, you can say, the bone of contention between these two countries as of right now, the Taliban led Afghanistan and Pakistan, is an organization called TTP. It's called TTP. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, when there was the main body of Taliban, which was in the US-led Afghanistan, this was the democratic government. An offshoot of the Taliban which developed in Pakistan was called the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, this organization is known for insurgency, and at the same point of time, known for terrorist activities, or we'll say military activities plus activities within Pakistan. Within Pakistan. Now, the basic assumption was that when Afghanistan will come under the Taliban, the activities of the TTP will go down. That is a very standard assumption by the ISI and the Pakistani government. It was a standard assumption that once the US-led Afghanistan government is gone and the Taliban captures power in Afghanistan, and because Taliban and Pakistan were natural partners vis-a-vis the US-led Afghanistan government, it was presumed that TTP's activity will go down in Pakistan itself. However, the way Taliban-led Afghanistan is dealing with TTP, which is with a lot of caution and is not allowing the TTP to actually get access to a lot of the governmental activities or governmental machinery, but not condemning their activities within Pakistan, TTP's, you can say, stance has not changed. And this is the first and the most important bone of contention between Afghanistan and Pakistan as of right now. Afghanistan would want the central Taliban leadership to remove or dilute TTP within Pakistan itself so that the insurgency activities and the terrorist activities within Pakistan would go down from Afghanistan. But that is not happening. This is the first point. I'll give you the details, and there are a lot of details here, but you have to understand the core issue because you will never be able to write all the details in the examination, what is given in the article itself. The second bone of contention, the second issue, if you want to call it, is the Afghanistan or Afghan migration which has happened over the last 2 decades because of the conflict in Afghanistan. Now, there was a lot of Afghan migration into Pakistan, and the conflict in Afghanistan for the past two decades led to a substantial population to basically migrate to Pakistan via the Durand Line. If you have noticed, even in Dhurandhar, the entry of Hamza was via Afghanistan. Therefore, the Durand Line was considered to be a point, not a point where there was a lot of checking between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and a lot of Afghanis actually used to migrate from this sector because of the US-led conflict in that area. Now, what the Pakistanis have started to do along the bordering sector or along the bordering areas, along the Durand Line, they have started to deport Afghans. They've started to deport Afghanis back to Afghanistan. And this has led to societal issues or issues between the two governments and a perceptual change amongst the Afghanis about the Pakistani government and ISI. Whilst there are other points of contention and conflict also, these two are seen as the biggest issue in that regard. The first one being that the TTP, the activities are not going down. It is still holding its ground in Pakistan. At the same point of time, the Afghani deportation from the Durand Line itself is based on the idea that Pakistan now wants to cleanse its bordering areas of the Afghani population. This has in turn led to a lot of conflict. Now, in a question in which they ask you why is Taliban-led Afghanistan and Pakistan fighting an open war, you have to mention these 2 points. If you're not mentioning these 2 points, you are missing the key areas. In this, if we add, other than the societal rupture, which is based on the idea of the deportation of Afghanis from Pakistan to Afghanistan, which has led to social alienation and a lot of political motivation and consciousness developing across this border. And at the same point of time, how the Pakistani military, ISI, and the Taliban leadership is not able to now cooperate on the points which they were able to do previously. And at the same point of time, Kabul and Islamabad are now, in a way, not able to come together on the same page even after multiple dialogues. There are deep-seated issues here which are now actually coming out. And at the heart of that is this: ISI versus the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP. It was believed that post 2021, once the Pakistani government will have a favorable regime in Afghanistan in the form of Taliban, TTP activities will go down. But the containment of TTP has not happened, which in turn has led to rising militancy between 2022 to 25 by TTP in Pakistan, in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area. And that is what is happening is now there is more insurgency activities by TTP in Pakistan itself. And though Imran Khan's government had a carrot and stick policy where it was trying to appease the Taliban and the TTP, this government has fully changed its stance. And because TTP represents Taliban, and at the same point of time, there is a lot of insurgency which is happening against the US also, and it is happening from the Pakistani soil. The US thinks that the TTP is actually not funded by Afghanistan but by Pakistan. And this idea that there is a dual-edged sword wherein US can't really trust the Pakistani government because they don't know if TTP is an entity which exists within Pakistan, funded by Pakistani or the Afghani government. There is one more issue here, which is the rise of the Islamic State. Because of the resurrection of the Islamic State in the Khorasan sector, the Taliban does not want to, in a way, alienate the TTP too much, because then it will become part of the Islamic State, the ISIS, which was properly obliterated in the Syrian sector and in that sector, but it is now resurrecting itself in Khorasan. Therefore, this TTP issue and the trust deficit which exists between Pakistan and Afghanistan government is now manifesting itself in the form of the Durand Line military conflict. So as I said, there are multiple small issues here, but the two main issues here revolve around this societal issue of Afghanis being deported out of Afghanistan, out of Pakistan towards Afghanistan. At the same point of time, the issue of the TTP, which is basically Pakistan's main priority is to reduce its presence in Pakistan, but that is where they expected the main Taliban government to do something about it. And there is no point of cooperation, or in a way, there's no point of consensus between the two as of right now. Now, do we understand why Afghanistan and Pakistan are fighting? We already understand Iran, Israel, but we will now revisit it again from a different perspective. Do we understand this issue? Yes or no? Yes, sir. Now, can Afghanistan led by Taliban led Afghanistan actually match Pakistan or have a prolonged war with Pakistan? And the answer to that question is no. The answer to that question is straightforward no. And there are multiple constraints here. First is Pakistan has an active army, navy, and an air force. Afghanistan does not have an air force or navy per se. So in this open war, Pakistan has an upper hand. Over and above that, this is a very important point, which is because Afghanistan is totally dependent on Karachi port for its food imports. And being a landlocked country, it is very, very difficult for Afghanistan to, in a way, hold this stance for too long. At the same point of time, Pakistan Air Force is able to do deep strikes into Kabul and other sectors, whilst they are only able to hit the Durand Line and the military forward posts. And in the end, what Pakistan wants is an open war, but Afghanistan wants is a certain guerrilla warfare based, what we call as protracted warfare. The idea is very simple. Afghanistan can close its passes, but at the end of the day, if Pakistan is supported by and has been supported by and is being supported by the US, this escalation could further lead to even more deaths on the Afghanistani side. However, we already know it is very, very difficult to subdue the Afghanis. The British were not able to do it in the colonial period. The Russians were not able to do it. The US were not able to do it. And the Taliban came back. So will Pakistan pay for this in the long run? And was this a necessary conflict per se? Is a question which time will only tell. But the answer will be in the history in that regard. But the point is, we as UPSC aspirants should know why are these two partners, and in a way it was their alignment was considered to be problematic for India, are now fighting. The whole of West Asia is now in conflict, including Pakistan, Afghanistan. Are we clear about this topic? Because there are 3 to 4 type of questions which can be asked, which is why, what are the issues, what are the implications, at the same point of time, overall perspective, and we can also be asked future. And future course of action is Afghanistan can't hold this conflict for a very, very, very long time because it does not have a strategic advantage of, you can say, military might vis-a-vis Pakistan per se. And Pakistan, as of right now, has the US by it. Right? Okay. Now, as of the past half an hour, the US President Donald Trump has argued and has now said that the Afghan war or the Israel-Afghan conflict may prolong and may enter into 4 to 5 weeks of conflict, which was not expected. Though they have been able to kill the supreme leader of Iran, Iran has not stopped its retaliation and its idea of revenge and avenging the death of its supreme leader. And this conflict will go beyond what US had thought. US is not denying pushing troops the way it had pushed troops on the ground in Iraq, in Libya, and at the same point of time, how it acted against the Syrian sector. But the point is that this war is again prolonging beyond what Israel wants. And as we know, in the Gulf, as of right now, there's proper chaos because the Strait of Hormuz has been closed by Iran. At the same point of time, there is an 8% increase in the price of oil, $80 per barrel. And there has been a major hit in Saudi Arabia and in Sharjah, in UAE, and basically one major refinery in Saudi Arabia, and in Sharjah, 2 major points, still drone attacks have happened. What was the expectation of Israel and US was, once the supreme leader is gone, there will be a surrender or some form of, you can say, the hard line of Iran would be removed. However, because the Iranian government already had put into place a succession plan, very quickly internal changes happened and they are not backing out. Now, the editorial which is linked to this topic tries to decode why is Israel doing this vis-a-vis Iran? Why is Israel so obsessed with Iran? And that is, this is an interesting, you can say, article, gives us fodder for a mains answer. Now, again, before I go into the nitty-gritty of the topic, before I go into the finer details of the topic, I would like to give you the basic argument here. See, the basic argument which this article makes is very simple and straightforward, which is for Israel, US is a very important partner. For Israel, US is a very important partner. At the same point of time, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, this whole Gulf sector, they all are US dependent. They all are USA dependent in the form of defense, in the form of the you can say army or navy or air force. In generic ways, the US in a way controls this lot. We cannot add Qatar. Yes, why not? We can add Qatar. Qatar has the biggest US base in that regard. Now, Israel does not see this bunch as a problem. It does not see this bunch as a problem, which is, it does not see Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Oman as a problem, because the US more or less controls their defense structure, defense architecture, and because the US is an ally of Israel, there is no threat per se for Israel. Now, this is where the antithesis or the biggest problem for Israel is Iran. Because from time to time, Iran has got help from either Russia or from China or from India. India, Chabahar port was hit. That is a port which we developed, but we have only given them economic help. Defense help comes from China and Russia. Again, China more than Russia. This is where the obsession of Israel comes from. Israel believes that there is bipolarity. There is bipolarity in West Asia. And because it has obliterated and destroyed the Palestinian sector, which is a Muslim dominated area and has an you can say, Muslim stance vis-a-vis its pro-US stance, Iran is seen as a natural enemy. Iran is seen as a natural enemy. Bipolarity means two poles. First pole is them itself, and the second pole is Iran. Now, Israel has, for a very, very long time, tried to either dilute Iran's nuclear program, derail Iran's nuclear program, and being a nuclear partner, if Iran's nuclear program is operational, at the same point of time, it has weapons of mass destruction, the position of Israel would be further weakened within West Asia. And this is where Israel, for the past 3 decades, has been very systematically influencing US politics vis-a-vis how it deals with Iran. Either it is about diluting the Iranian sector and its nuclear program, though it was not very happy with Obama's stance where a nuclear deal was made. And at the same point of time, it has always said that the ballistic missiles program and the missile program within Iran should be shut down. And Iran has always said that we will never stop our missile, you can say, production, because if today we stop, Israel either way is going to attack us. And this move, as you see today, this move, as you see today, and what is happening vis-a-vis US, Israel versus Iran, is Israel trying to make West Asia unipolar. And that is the whole point of this article. A war to build a unipolar West Asia. So basically, in the examination, you can use this terminology. The terminology of calling this bipolarity of Israel versus Iran to a unipolarity where US dominates with Israel dominates with the help of US. So the first point, and a very valid point which is made by the article itself, is that Iran is the only revisionist country that challenges the supremacy of Israel in West Asia. All Arab countries, many of them hosting American bases, are dependent on American aid and would directly establish ties with Israel and accept Israeli militarism in this sector. On the other hand, it is only the Iranians who would never bow down to the Israelis. So therefore, because these Arab nations are bound by the US in that regard, it is only Iran which has the power to say something against Israel. So that is where this existential threat concept comes from. At the same point of time, when we talk about how Israel wants to deal with Iran, it has always talked about total disarmament of Iran and removing all of its ballistic missiles, which Iran has never accepted because it knows that the day it accepts it, the Israelis are going to attack Iran. Further, this attempt, this whole conflict which started on Sunday, this is to bring in a regime change. The US did this in the case of Saddam Hussein, in the case of Gaddafi, in the case of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Now they are doing it in Iran also. But Hamas and Hezbollah are not really, in a way, weakened by this resolve of the Israelis, because Hezbollah has attacked Israel yesterday itself. And therefore, the Arab countries are not going to condemn the actions of Israel that much as this way in which Iran has been, in a way, an adversary of Iran, of Israel. So this time Iran has gone beyond what it has done previously. Previously, Iran used to only attack military bases and only used to attack maximum Qatar because Qatar had the biggest US base. Now what Iran has done is it has made this war into a regional war and now has made the Arab partners think, how much does this dependency cost? Because at the end of the day, because of US dependency and this defense dependency, they have been hit multiple times. So therefore, Iran's strategy was to mushroom this war bigger than what Israel could manage. And now they have successfully prolonged this war. The more this war gets prolonged, the weaker the position of the US is going to become. Because then it would have to put its own troops into Iran and then go for a transition, which would be even more messier, and this will become a new Afghanistan. This will become a new Afghanistan. That is why this article has 5 to 6 very important things to tell us. And you can't really use it directly in the examination unless you're trying to write an answer where you're contextualizing everything together. Why do we consider regional war? Because now the whole Gulf is involved. So there are 4 points which you should note. The first point is that the US, Israel versus Iran concept is based on bipolarity and the attempt to induce unipolarity, which is the domination of Israel. At the same point of time, Israel has tried to manage and dictate US policy towards Iran, which has always been about weakening it to a point that it can be destroyed. Third is Iran has made this war into a regional war now, with all partners in question involved. And last but not the least is that Iran has not backed out. This is going to cost the US and Israel in the long run. This will cost the US and Israel in the long run, because the more they get involved in this war on the ground, the messier it will become, and therefore the Afghan story is going to be repeated. So let's see where this conflict goes from this point forward. But the point is that this is Israel's attempt to induce unipolarity, and this is its last, you can say, hurrah or last push, because they have now gone for the regime change. This was the biggest impediment for Israel to do what they wanted to do, which is they've now killed the supreme leader of Iran itself. But the problem is Iran is still not backing out or basically surrendering to this will of Israel. So because they have their own, you can say, structures in place, they have been able to respond much quicker. So therefore, be it US Israel, be it Israel itself, this is and has been dubbed as an imperialistic attempt. An attempt where Israel is trying to create its you can say, its power and trying to expand its power in this whole sector in that way. So what have we understood? We have understood 2 to 3 very interesting concepts about Iran, Israel, and Pakistan. If everybody is with me on this, I would like to summarize everything onto one slide so that you have something to work with. Democratic government, USA, left region, unsettled like Afghanistan. Yes, the probability of doing that is much higher. Is much higher than them actually managing this crisis properly. Okay. So what we have understood is the Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship is now in crisis because of 2 reasons. TTP, deportations, ISI versus Taliban, and you can say Pakistan's attempt to control Afghan politics. Out of this, these 2 are very important factors. This TTP is the real problem. Tehreek-e-Taliban is the real problem. At the same point of time, Iran, Israel, US. This triangulation is based on the idea that Israel wants to be the only power which calls the shots in West Asia. Basically, there are 2 poles right now. There is bipolarity, and Israel wants to induce unipolarity. And it has gone for the oldest trick in the book, which is regime change. However, This has not yielded till this point on the ground the proper results it should have. And again, Trump has dragged the US into a war which per se is not going to end so quickly. So we have now been able to complicate this whole issue in such a way that you can now explain it to the examiner. Meaning, if you can reproduce this in the examination, and if you can talk about unipolarity, bipolarity, and Iran's attempt to challenge Israel's domination, and why the Arab nations will not say anything if these two concepts are totally sorted, then we can move on to the subsidiary topics and smaller topics for today. If this makes sense, which is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Israel, US. I want everybody's consent here. Yes, sir. We are all sorted. We understand what you're trying to say. Yes, sir. Come on, come on. Everyone has to agree. Okay. Now, in the Canada India saga, which has again recently resurrected itself from the dead because of the Khalistani issue, which is still not dead, there are multiple points of cooperation and positive developments which have been flagged or which have been coming out from New Delhi for the past 2 to 3 days. And there are 3 very important developments in this relationship. India and Canada have now agreed for a 10-year uranium supply deal for India's nuclear reactors. Canada has a lot of uranium which it can export to India, and a 10-year deal has been signed for $1.9 billion. At the second point of, you can say, cooperation, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the CEPA, which has been in the news for Canada and India for a very, very long time now. Both countries, and specifically Canada, has vowed that it is going to complete the basic terms of reference by the end of this year. So most probably, how we have had an, you can say, BTA with America and we have a FTA with the EU, this, you can say, free trade agreement should also go forward, and let's hope that it manifests itself by the end of this year. At the same point of time, the prime ministers have agreed for renewable energy, LPG, and strategic partnership in critical minerals so as to counter what China has been doing. This is in line with what India has been doing for the past 1 year, vis-a-vis China, taking Germany on board also, now Canada on board also. And the terms of reference of the CAPA, which should help this relationship, will come very soon, along with Canada joining the ISA and the Global Biofuel Alliance as led by India in that regard. So, though there was a shadow of the Khalistani issue over this, you can say, meeting also, but both sides have been, and specifically Canada has been able to keep that aside and talk about the good points and points of cooperation in the economic sphere and in energy security. So therefore, it seems that we are now on track to getting this relationship sorted, if because still 2 embassy officials are under investigation, if Canada is ready to understand India's concerns about the Khalistani program, Khalistani movement, which has been harboring in Canada for a very, very long time. Maybe there can be also some form of arrests, and at the same point of time, some form of activities which the Canadians can do to gain India's confidence in this relationship. But somehow we are seeing, with this, you can say, regime change with Trudeau gone, a lot of cooperation and a lot of positive development for Canada and India relationship. So nothing out of the box. Just have to remember that there is a, you can say, positive turn to this relationship per se. Now, the second last article for today deals with a Supreme Court issue. There is an NGO called Sarvesham Mangalam Foundation, and it took the issue of right to safe blood transfusion. It argued that right to safe blood transfusion is a fundamental right as part of right to life in under Article 21, and the Supreme Court is now considering the options which are available to the blood banks in India vis-a-vis how they can screen for three very major diseases, which is hepatitis C, B, and HIV. See, for thalassaemic patients who are not able to produce red blood cells by themselves, blood transfusion is the only option. And in India, a lot of infections, diseases spread because of incorrect blood transfusion or the blood being contaminated by some form of disease, be it HIV, be it hepatitis B, hepatitis C, malaria, dengue. There are multiple diseases which are spread in the hospital due to blood transfusion. This you can say NGO is arguing that there should be screening of blood once it is actually, you can say, donated to a blood bank. Now the Supreme Court is taking NAT, which is nucleic acid test, and the other one, which is called ELISA test, into consideration. The Chief Justice is arguing that it is a very expensive test. Can, for example, a state like UP and very small blood banks do these type of tests? Cost effectiveness is being questioned, but it's an interesting and positive development with regards to how we want to make sure that right to safe blood transfusion becomes part of right to life under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So interesting development how there can be liberal interpretations of Article 21, and we have reached to a point where the Supreme Court is now taking into consideration, can we also have blood transfusion screening? Interesting, and you should see how our Constitution has the leeway to include these forms of, you can say, petitioning and writ petitions or even cases also. So interesting, we don't know what is going to happen. Sub judice, let's see what is the outcome of this whole, you can say, process and the NGO in that regard. The last discussion which we need to have is the fallout of the West Asian conflict on the tea industry. Everybody has been talking about what is going to happen to what is called as oil, but tea is also a very important, you can say, cogwheel in the export economy of India. Now, in order to give you an understanding of what it actually means, is that, see, 45 to 50% of all tea exports of India actually go to West Asia. At the same point of time, this free traffic further goes to Central Asia, such as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and to Uzbekistan. And therefore, with the Hormuz Strait and supply chain disruption, which is happening because of this conflict, there is a very good chance that our tea industry is going to see a major impact in how it sells in West Asia and further in Central Asia. To give you an understanding, Iraq, UAE, Iran, and Saudi Arabia are one of the major export destinations of our tea, and therefore there is a major concern on how this sector is going to take the impact of this whole relationship going down the drain, which is basically Israel and Iran. Israel and Iran impact will come on the tea sector also. Don't have to learn this data, but please do understand that what are the major export destinations, what is the volume, 45 to 50%, and further it connects to Central Asia, meaning we used to take it to the UAE, and then from UAE we used to further transfer it to the Central Asian sector, which is not going to happen now, and therefore this hub distribution problem is going to impact our TSEC. So what we've discussed today is a set of topics which revolve around two major issues. One, Israel-Iran. I had already predicted this. There are thousands of articles in the newspaper about small developments. Certain flights have now started to take off from Abu Dhabi and Dubai airport also. There are 10 flights from Indigo which have now started to operate to get the what we call as the people who are stuck in the Dubai, because Dubai is a hub and spoke concept where most of the US flights you go via Dubai or via Abu Dhabi. Etihad, Emirates being very important carriers, they are now stuck in the Dubai and Abu Dhabi sector. We are now also keeping our warships on standby for humanitarian, you can say, rescue and humanitarian programs. As I said, the problem is that this is now going beyond a point, and tanker which was hit in Oman and in Qatar was the Indian operators were there. We have lost you can say mariner also. So things are not going as per plan for the US. We just have to see when will this conflict end, because this will have an impact on the global supply chain. This will have an impact on the global supply chain. We just have to see in what context will US be able to come out of this with the favorable you can say outcomes it wanted, and can keep Israel also happy in that regard, right? So with this, our analysis for today is done. Dedicated Indian operation, as of right now, no dedicated Indian operation has started. Only the airline industry, airline companies are you can say operating special flights till these two major points to get Indians back. There most probably will be something, but maybe in the next week or so. So thank you, take care, bye, and happy Holi to all of you.